But I want us to read about what Jesus tells the people to do. He says that he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. First of all, these are the witnesses of the act. So if anyone's going to throw a stone, it's going to be the witnesses. Secondarily, he says, any one of you without sin, cast a stone at her. Now, I want us to know that we could commit adultery even within our minds. I see a man's wife, so humble, so meek, but at the same time, so driven. Everything about this spouse is something that I envy. I would want for myself. So in my very mind, I could commit adultery. In our very conversations, we could commit adultery. Man, if I could, I would. And then obviously we could commit adultery in the very act by having a sexual encounter or an affair, or by divorcing your spouse and marrying another. Now, Jesus knows the hearts of these men, the accusers, the witnesses of the very act of adultery involving this woman. And he still continues to bow down his head and write on the ground. Because why? They had to judge themselves first. Jesus is showing us that we're too quick to call someone an adulterer when we don't know all the details. Sometimes in the case of an affair, they could be beguiled, coming as a friend, coming as a guide, coming as a counselor, coming as some type of support. One thing leads to another. Now you're caught in the very act. That's why men, women, children, you have to stay prayed up and you have to be in the Spirit. If someone does not fear God, you should leave them. So how do you know if they fear God or if they don't? Try them with small things first. If they're going to outwardly say that something that's clearly written as this is not true, but there's certain circumstances, that person does not fear God, leave them. If you have friends that are in the church and they're hearing the same word that you're hearing, but they still find time to party, drink, and do everything that they shouldn't be doing, separate yourselves from them. Because it's only a matter of time until you start doing the same things they're doing. And it's always amazing when people start speaking to you about the sins that you're committing and they're saying, I thought you were different. That's a burden that some people can't take and drives them down a hole that is deeper than they could come out. In 9, and they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Now, they were convicted by what? Their conscience. But they caught the woman in the very act of adultery. But their conscience is what stopped them from being judges over this woman to commit her to death. But that never stopped them from speaking ill against her. That's what I'm saying, the chastisement of men. Many people may leave that lifestyle, but you have to realize you're leaving for you, not for them. Do not expect you're going to build a new reputation If a new one comes, that's great. And the people accept it, that's great. Because it's one thing to have a new reputation, a whole nother thing for people to accept your new reputation. People like to remember the old you. And it isn't until you start making changes for yourself that the people's opinions don't matter any longer. That's what Paul had to do. That's what this woman, which is Mary, had to do. In 10, when Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Have no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. You see why there's different levels of adultery? Because when you divorce your spouse only to remarry another, it becomes more difficult to stop adultery, right? You're doing it every day. So it becomes a lifestyle. You get children, and children are born into that lifestyle. They want to become leaders within the church, maybe start their own church. And they're still judged by their foundation. Not saying that that should stop them, but I'm saying it's a hindrance. People are too quick to leave their spouses in times of an affair, regardless of whether children are involved or not. And you don't realize, although you both have contributed to the faults within your marriage, it doesn't mean the children should suffer. Pick up yourself. Pick up your marriage. Continue moving forward. If not for you, then for them. And Jesus just turns to her and says, Go and sin no more. I mean, some of us have been there, and so we're like, how do you just stop? I've been doing this for years. But Jesus says clearly, go and sin no more. When God has given you life, he hasn't given you life to commit more sin or to repeat the same sin. He's given you life to prove yourselves, not to man, to him. Now, is the life of this woman going to be easy? No. But she has life. She literally faced death for the decision that she made. And many people say, well, where's the man in all this? Well, ask the witnesses. They judged the woman unworthy for whatever reason. Maybe she has a reputation. But nonetheless, we don't want to speculate too much without the right amount of evidence. The idea is what they brought forth. And although they brought forth her, she was delivered. So it was her time for deliverance. Now, Jesus being a man of God, he is God, but in this sense, we're just going to call him a man of God. So just go and sin no more. We as leaders, spiritual leaders, we need to learn to do the same. And if you are a spiritual leader doing this, that means your fear of God has left. The fear of God has left you. And if you're married, you no longer respect your spouse to the level that you once did. And you no longer respect yourself. So it's time for you to go down to the potter's house and see him work on the wheel. For those who think that it's impossible, for those who think that if I committed an act, I can't get up from this, I can't rise from this, I can't do better from this. It's not true. This same woman is the one who anointed Jesus' feet. But she had to take it upon herself to fulfill the word that Jesus said, go and sin no more. So saints, I'm here to tell you the same thing. If you're caught in adultery, if you're living a life of adultery, meaning that you have divorced your spouse and remarried. Many of you who have divorced and remarried, your first spouse, you're still very good friends with. Or you could still get along with. Make amends. Come back together. Rebuild. But this time differently. Not based off of your foundation, but on God's. God bless.